My name's Hillary.
I'm Marissa.
We're speech pathologists here at CARD. Today we wanted to talk about some technology uses to use with our population specifically that we use in therapy, but also we hope that there's, for those of you who are clinicians, materials that you can share with your families. It seems to be a hot kind of topic coming up lately of how they can, I get asked a lot how they can decrease their technology use. So hopefully there's some good tips in here.
So kind of like Hillary said, we're going to talk about some of the positive reasons we can use technology, but also those negative effects if we're using it too much. We're going to review the new AAP recommendations of media use, and then discuss those strategies that we can use ourselves with kids or give to parents during our sessions.
So we'll use the terms technology, screen time, media, electronics, all interchangeably. Sometimes parents ask if what screen time is or if that's different. So basically just anything with the screen. So obviously all of these things, tablets, phones, TV, video games, laptops, computers.
So how much? What percent of children use screens at home? 91% of children under 8 have access to screens in the home. Most prevalent are tablets and smartphones. It might not be their own personal devices, but whether they have access from their parents or siblings. How many devices do children use? By age 1, they're using at least 2 different devices, and 4 devices by the time they're 8. So that could be like your smartphone, your laptop, your computer, or in your video games, kind of TV, anything like
that. So some more just research on how much is being used for older kids. 45% of teenagers ages 13 to 17 say they go online almost constantly. And almost half report that they're online at least several times a day. And these are kids obviously in school for a large chunk of the day, so they're still reporting that they're online all the time, even with school. 95% of teens have their own or have access to a smartphone, and 84% of teens have their own or have access to a gaming console at home.
We'll see a little bit later that usage for teens is kind of consistent across typically developing teens and teens with autism. So some of these statistics are probably the same for both populations. Some of the benefits, if used correctly, a lot of the educational benefits could be that they're learning school and academic concepts. We hear parents coming in saying, my kid knows all their shapes and numbers because they play this app on their iPad. Communication, it's easy and fun to communicate, can help elicit different language from kids who are quieter. Physical benefits like fine motor skills, cognitive benefits, like increased creativity and increased access to knowledge. If we don't know something, we can Google it. Behavior, children are really motivated by their devices. And then social benefits can be social media, although it's not quite studied how teens with ASD are using social media yet, but it's definitely not as much as typically developing teens.
And so for a long time, since the 90s, we've known that there are good things that come out of technology, and obviously in classrooms and our therapies, we all like technology and use it. One of the nice things is that the AAP talks about and has done some research on video chats and FaceTiming. And so as young as 6 months, babies can learn from pro-social media, like video chats or like early developmental shows, appropriate programming. But even though they can take away some things from those programs, they learn 20 times better from just interacting with their parents using a toy that goes over that concept versus an app that does it on their own. And babies as young as 6 months can also differentiate between a video, so like watching someone walk around, and video chats, so FaceTiming with someone, which is really interesting. And it's nice that we can say, we're not going to include video chatting and FaceTiming in our kind of screen time usage or screen time limits because kind of inherently a social interaction. mom is there like holding the phone while the child is involved. So that's a nice way that we are able to use technology.
In a 2015 survey from ASHA, they talked to parents about technology use, and 24% reported that they were using it all the time, especially at the dinner table, and then 45% by age 8. 50% of parents rely on technology, again, to maybe prevent those problem behaviors or tantrums. More than 50 use technology to keep their children entertained, so maybe on a car ride or when mom is doing a chore around the house. And by age 6, 44% of children report that they would rather use their technology than read a book. So that kind of shows how motivating this is for kids. And that's actually by age 6. So they really love their technology and access to that.
So also in the survey, they asked parents about their concerns about technology use. And so over half of parents reported that they're concerned that technology might impact their child's hearing. About half were concerned about their child's speech and language skill development. Only 2% were concerned that technology impacts the quality of the conversation they're having with their children. So the next statistic, they're concerned that they are having fewer conversations with their kids, but they think when they're having conversations, they're still just as meaningful. And the majority of parents reported that they know that they should set limits and they do kind of set them, but then they don't enforce them consistently.
So this is kind of going back to what we talked about before, device use and intensity for teens with ASD. There is an average and a low group. So the average contained kids with like average or above average language and cognitive skills. And then the low group had those teens that had low language level or low cognition. But even so, it's similar to device usage for typically developing teens. There were some differences in those who had lower functioning autism. They used computers less and touchscreen devices more. And that could be because some of those even motor skills, they can't do as much typing and they're going to use those iPads a little bit more. They use smartphones less, and then as we know, they'll have access to some of these dedicated communication devices to support their language and give them a way to communicate. Teens with ASD had significantly more difficulty doing some of these positive things that we use technology for, like filling out forms, like a job application, or even if you're ordering something online, kind of filling out that process. And even just accessing information on a website, they had a harder time looking for the things that they're looking for or finding the information that's going to be helpful to them. Parents of all groups are concerned about their child's video viewing habits, but the concern was highest with those kids with average or above average cognition and language, whether it being inappropriate content, too much time being spent watching videos, or inappropriate purchasing. So going online and not realizing that this is connected to mom and dad's credit card account and buying the things that they want. They saw the same kind of concerns with video games, inappropriate content, maybe too much excitement surrounding a video game, leading to some inappropriate behaviors, and then also some refusal or negative behaviors when those games were removed or it was time to be like all done playing.
So now some of the negative effects that we know can happen with too much screen time exposure. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has done a lot of studies about what infants, babies are recognizing on screen. So they know that they're kind of mesmerized by the screen, that it's really exciting and engaging, but their brains as babies really don't know that what they're seeing on the screen is real life or can be the same thing as what they're seeing in the world. And it takes 2 full years for them to realize that like the dog that they're seeing in a show, even if it's a real dog and not a cartoon dog, is the same as the dog that they can see in the real world. And so they learn better through these real life experiences. So you can watch a dog on TV, you can maybe hear it bark or see the actions that it does. If you can interact with a dog, it's talk about how it feels soft or it might lick you, and you get all these different sensory experiences from it. So bottom line is that our babies are learning best from interacting in the real world and not just with screens.
Some other cons to technology are these physical effects like sleep patterns, increased risk of obesity, cognitive impairments, so like language learning delays, academic delays, short-term memory skills and less creative play. So if they're not spending time playing with toys off the screen, they might not have the ability to be more creative with toys. And then emotional and social concerns too, increased risks of attention, anxiety, and depression. You might have less social interactions, or you might be exposed to content that is inaccurate or inappropriate. So even us like searching something online, we have a hard time differentiating what is a reputable source and what's not. Children or teens with autism would have that same difficulty, if not more difficult for them. And then also there's this element of compromised privacy and confidentiality. So if you don't know the rules, you might not know I don't share my full name with someone online, or I don't share my address or my phone number. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about later, how to implement some strategies to combat these difficulties.
And these cons that we're talking about are also, like, these have been studied for typically developing children. So these are happening with our children without autism. And so some of the things we mentioned, like, we know that children are already at risk when they have autism to, like, be more socially isolated or not know those kind of privacy boundaries. So if our typically developing kids are experiencing these, we know they might be even more impactful with our ASD kiddos. Our language specific cons are that parents are just speaking a lot less. So even when the TV is just on in the background, parents aren't realizing that they are only speaking 170 words an hour, compared to when the TV isn't on in the background, they're speaking 940 words an hour just to their toddlers. They're having fewer verbal exchanges, fewer interactions overall, less complex play interactions. When they're playing with electronics versus real toys, parents are talking less during the electronic play. And then, like we've mentioned, those behaviors that we see when screens are removed.
So this is just kind of a list of the AAP screen time guidelines, and we'll go into a little bit more here.
So they updated these guidelines, and then the table was kind of for kids 0 to 2 and kids 2 to 5, which we'll talk about. And then we also have some recommendations for kids who are older than 5. So for our 0 to 2 population, we already know that they need to explore the world around them, interact with humans more than their screens, that they don't really get that the screen is representing what's happening in the real world. So the AAP has recommended that they have very limited exposure to screen time. They don't give an exact time. That they're exposed to screens only when an adult is standing by to co-view or talk about it and teach them what they're seeing. And once they get to that 18 months to 2 years, they can handle some screen time exposure and learn some things from the right programming. It's high quality, and again, they stress that the parent should be there with the child and avoid that solo media use when the kids are this young.
And then recommendations for ages 2 to 5, limit screen use to no more than 1 hour per day. So that's kind of a steadfast number that parents and caregivers can think about. And then find other activities that your child can do that they enjoy. Choose media that's interactive, nonviolent, educational, pro-social, and again, co-viewing with your child so that you can maybe explain what's going on if they have questions, or just do a little bit more describing and talking about what they're seeing is super important.
For kids who are 6 and older, they recommend to place consistent limits on the time spent using media. So we know our 2 to 5 was 1 hour a day, which we'll talk about if that's realistic or not. But consistent limits on their media even when they get older, and limits on the type of media being used, and then making sure that the media isn't in place of these important activities: sleep, physical exercise, other healthy behaviors.
There was a couple changes in these recommendations. Previously, under 18 months, they said no screen time is best except for video chat. 15 months to 2 years, avoid social media use. So basically, they lifted the no screens under 2 rule. Again, like we said before, if you're using it to do some video chatting or in a more pro-social way, it's okay. Age 2 to 5 years, no more than 1 hour per day with caregiver participation. And the biggest change is focusing on who is in the room, not just what's on the screen. Again, that co-viewing model.
So like I kind of mentioned before, we know a lot of these problems can occur in kids without autism, but what happens when we add autism into the mix? They might be just more vulnerable, and we know that they likely are more vulnerable to the negative, the cons of technology. A lot of our kids already have sleep disturbances, so if screen time can affect that and autism can affect that, kind of a double whammy. Arousal regulation issues, it can make them really excited, playing video games. Their brain it can be less integrated and kind of more compartmentalized, and screen time kind of encourages that compartmentalization. Social and communication deficits can happen just because of technology, also just because of autism. They're more prone to anxiety, kind of attention issues, and they might be more at risk for developing technology addictions.
So now we're going to go over some tips and tricks for our kids with ASD to manage technology at home.
So we have kind of 10 of these that we'll go through, and hopefully some of these you can share with your families. So our first tip is to have some maybe tech-free zones in the home. If meal times aren't a stressful time, maybe that could be a tech-free zone. Bedtime, where both adults and children are agreeing not to use technology all the time. So just like we're using in all of our interventions, maybe having visuals and kind of supports to help those tech-free zones. Have a box when you walk into the kitchen or whatever. Everybody drops their phone. Visuals can help with that.
Find other ways to entertain. So only using technology as needed, and spending as much time doing other social activities together. When they're really young, these babies, social games work really well at just getting your child to laugh, play with you, using developmentally appropriate toys, games, and books, and then spending time just outside with family and friends. These are some ways that these kind of younger kiddos could be entertained without technology. For teens, you can engage them in developing their own list of these alternative activities. Oftentimes, our teens with ASD might not be drawn to things like athletics, like going outside and playing soccer, or playing basketball, or working out. So you could even think of a hobby like chess or theater, drawing, reading, and collecting. I think that's one that our kiddos with ASD would like a lot, finding something to collect and then going outside or going to different parts of the house to like find those objects. I thought that was a really cool idea. And then you can kind of use a behavioral program that rewards teens for completing these other leisure activities. And if you feel like you don't have the right support or information for that, always consulting with a mental health provider to help set up that program.
And I think the kids, like the older kids and teens, can really be involved in that process. You know, especially if we're going to tell our families like to start implementing these kind of things that their kids aren't used to. The parent could say, "We're going to place this limit on technology. What do you want to do to take the place of it?" So third tip, not overestimating the value of technology. And I feel like especially when kids are younger, this can be an issue that these apps are like marketed as educational and they're good for their cognitive processes. They'll teach letters, numbers, colors, shapes, which we know our kids love. But kids still learn those concepts better from adults. And they also don't really need to know those concepts when they're coming to us when they're really little.
Consider the 3 C's: content, child, and context. So content would be like watching developmentally appropriate things, really focusing on what's actually on the screen and if it's appropriate for their age, maybe even appropriate for their language level too. Child, think about them individually, like what motivates them? What are they going to enjoy interacting with you instead of technology? And then context, where will and won't you use it? So kind of like the first strategy, place those limits, always thinking about that context, where you can use it, how you can even be involved in that too.
So one kind of fun idea is to make it a group activity. So I feel like especially, you know, when our kids are like 4 or 5, we have that 1 hour a day rule, but they might really enjoy watching a movie with you or something, which would be longer than an hour. So if you're watching as a group and you're watching a movie, you can talk about what's going on, right? How's that character feeling? What would you do in this situation? What do you think is going to happen next? And then consider thinking of it as a group activity. Consider when the kids really need their own device, because it will get harder to control the content and the usage when they have their own personal device. And they are more likely to use it by themselves rather than in this group setting.
If you're doing things related to technology as a group, it's a good opportunity for parents to learn about their child's interests. Oftentimes, if I ask parents, like, what does your child like to do, or what kind of shows are they watching? Many times they might not have an idea of what they are doing on their technology. So making it a group activity can just help parents learn those things. You can use it as a time to discuss values and share experiences. So if a parent recognizes something on the TV show or in a video game that applies to them, they can share that experience with their child and talk through it together. Parents can communicate about treating others with respect online and offline. So even playing video games together is a good time to like demonstrate good sportsmanship and gaming etiquette. And I like to think about it as like when I was younger, we used to play board games together as a family, and that's a time to teach like turn taking and rule following and being a good sport. So taking those concepts and then transferring it to playing video games is a way to teach those concepts in the context of using technology. Just making it a group activity helps teens avoid risky online behaviors and supports them in developing healthy relationships, and you can like model those things for them when you're using technology too.
Number 6 would be to set daily limits, which we all know, and it might not be the hour-a-day rule. I feel like it's whatever is realistic for your family, and if you have a family that your kid has 5 hours of screen time a day, tomorrow they can't cut it down to that 1 hour a day, so maybe go in baby steps. Determine that time when all devices will be turned off, and then parents can do it too. And our usual strategies: provide clear warnings, use timers, use visuals, just to help make that transition a little easier.
Be consistent. Like before, parents were reporting that they know some of these rules and they try to enforce them, but in reality, they're not always following through. So consistently enforcing and enforcing across all contexts or at the same time each day, or making that routine, especially for kiddos with ASD, will be helpful.
And in terms of practicing safe listening, obviously we want everyone to do that, but our kids with ASD might have those kind of over sensitivities or under sensitivities and listen to it really loud or really be super sensitive when they have headphones in. And as they get older, it's cool to listen to music loud, I guess, but we should talk about, safe listening even as they're getting older.
Model technology use. This is a big one we've kind of talked about. Just modeling the behaviors and habits that you want your child to practice. So when it's time for technology drop-off for dinner time, you're putting your phone away too. Having, again, those spaces where you can and can't use technology, and setting a time when you turn off your devices. So if it's around bedtime, everyone turns off their devices and puts them away. Once your kids go to sleep, that's not to say that you don't bring them back out because you have work to do or emails to catch up on, but just showing them that you're practicing these really healthy habits. and modeling those healthy behaviors, their child might be more likely to do them with you.
And then just always being on the lookout for signs when they're younger of things like communication disorders, hearing loss that can be associated with some of these technology risks. But as they get older, keeping an eye, and as they get their own devices, especially on social isolation, withdrawal, difficulties with peers, and then acting quickly if you do notice any of these signs. You can always refer to an SLP if there are any communication or social concerns, your pediatrician, your school providers, behavior psychologists might be really helpful if families are going to start implementing some of these strategies too.
And this is kind of the last big strategy that we encourage parents to use, is to create a family media plan, which is available on healthychildren.org. It's available in Spanish and in English. So the first part would be to set kind of your schedule for the day, or understand how your child is using their time. This can be done for just parents only who have little ones that just want to see, like, what are we doing each day? How much time are we really spending with family time, with free time, with screen time? Or it could be done with your teens or even younger children who have the language to complete the activity with their parents, to figure out how your kids are using, again, their time. I've done this activity with some older teens, even adults with autism, like 19, 20, and even just understanding, like, I sleep for 9 hours, I go to school for 8 hours, like, what are you spending the rest of your time doing? Understanding, like, when I get home, I might eat a snack and kind of just hang out. But then we also spend time doing homework, we spend time with personal care, like taking a shower, getting ready for school. So our kids have a hard time understanding, like, where their time is going and what leisure activities they're doing. So this is a good visual for them to see, like, oh, I come home and then I use my technology for 7 hours. We might need to find, like, somewhere in there where we can be doing a chore or finding a new hobby or spending time with family. And then there's a kind of a survey that you can fill out together to create that media plan. Different categories, like, you can agree on screen-free zones, kitchen or dining room, it could be bedrooms, you can add your own. We'll not use mobile devices during times when you're, like, doing your homework. Sometimes for teens too, there's options for, I'm not going to use it when I'm driving, or I'm not going to use it when I'm walking across the street. So it's really explicit for them, something that we might not think about, but those are times where for us it's kind of more obvious that it's dangerous to use media during those times. Less so for our kiddos, so just putting it on paper might help. You can agree on, like, screen group time, like, what are we going to do when we use media as a group? Are we going to video chat? Use media to be creative, like, are you gonna make a PowerPoint about your favorite thing, or are you gonna draw on your iPad? They talk about being good digital citizens, so that goes into, like, respecting privacy of others, not being rude or bullying online, and following safety rules. So again, talking about, like, we don't give out our personal data, we don't use a phone while driving, don't text and drive, all these safety rules that can be explicitly talked about when you create this plan. So I think going through this with your kiddos would be even more helpful, not just you setting the rules, but really, like, talking it out. I think even kids as young as maybe, like, 6 years old, who kind of have the language and ability to say, okay, this is, like, the time we're going to drop off our screens. This is what we're going to do together. I think that if they could do this, and you'll maybe get more buy-in from them that way.
I even think for younger kids, using a media plan or giving one to our families when they come in. There's a lot of families who the kid is at different places. Grandparents are watching them during the day. Mom and dad have different rules at their own homes. And so if a family could, like, create this plan and share it, we have a lot of kids who learn, like, I can go to grandma's house and watch my iPad for 6 hours, and then it's really hard to go home to mom and not have that access. So it might even be useful just for the families to use before the kids are able to have their say.
I think even during like weekend times too, or vacations, like you might need to make another one of these and say, okay, we have a little bit more time for media use, but the other time we are going to spend doing more like social activities or exercise, taking a walk, something like that, going to the pool. So you might have to adjust this for other circumstances too.